Welcome back, everyone. This is Amber. I am going into my 6th year of teaching. I live in southern Arizona, and I live in an urban area, so my school is an urban school. And I wanted to talk today about how I do behavior management and what has worked for me, and share that with you because I know a lot of new teachers are starting, and sometimes it really helps. I used to be on the PD committee for my school, and I will tell you that every time we sent out a survey asking what teachers wanted more training on, it was always on behavior management. So if you're interested in that and you think you'd be interested in my type of content, go ahead and click the subscribe button. Let's get into the video. I've been thinking about this video and how to do it for quite a while. I've been kind of mulling over different videos I've watched, different trainings I've done, and thinking about how I would present it. And I decided to kind of go with the who, what, why, where approach a little bit. So when we think about behavior management, we need to think about some of the underlying things that have to do with, for instance, why? Why do we have to manage behavior? Why can't we just go into the first day of school and just be like, I'm gonna teach, and bring your lesson plans and just go ahead and start teaching? Why can't we do that? That's what all of us wish we could do, but that's not really realistic. We all know that we have to manage behavior because if you are going into teaching, more than likely you've seen children before, and more than likely you remember your own childhood. So why do we have to manage behavior? Well, that's an important question to figure out for how you're going to manage behavior. So for instance, do we have to manage behavior to show how powerful we are in class, how in control we are in the classroom? Are we doing it to look good? Well, I personally think that's a bad idea. If that's what's driving you to manage behavior, that's going to be a problem. What about the reason that we manage behavior in the classroom is for safety? I need to know that all of my students are safe. I need to know that I'm safe. And a lot of behavior, unmanaged behavior, isn't safe. So safety is a big thing for why we manage behavior. Also, not much learning goes on if behavior isn't managed. If you go into a classroom and everybody's talking and loud and there's running around and things are getting thrown, like hardly anybody's learning. Maybe like 10%, those 10% that are just like, I'm here for a job, I'm gonna get this learning done. They exist and they're awesome. I love them. But for the rest of them, nobody is learning anything. And another thing is, it is important to consider your own sanity because what one person can handle and another person can handle are completely different. And so a lot of behavior management, I don't have to have it because I'm in control, but I do have to have it so I'll stay sane. I can't handle y'all not putting your names on papers. I'm gonna go insane trying to figure out whose paper it is. So it's a little thing, but I need it. Or there are teachers who cannot stand the fidgety or the up and down of the bouncy balls. Doesn't bother me. I look at them, I'm like, bouncing. But there are some teachers who can't handle it. And you need to know which one you are, because it does make a difference. Your sanity does matter. So going back to our questioning idea, who needs to be managed? And this one, everybody's thinking, Amber, that's duh. I know who needs to be managed. It's the students. The students need to be managed. And you're right, to a certain extent, but who are the students? And this will make a difference, because management looks different for a kindergarten class than it does for a high school class. It looks different for a art class than it does for a general education class. So who's being managed? Well, a couple other things. So let's think. You figured out, oh, I'm teaching 4th grade, or I'm teaching 5th grade, or 3rd grade, or whatever. I know now who I'm managing. Well, there's still some more. So, are you managing students who are in a rural environment? Are you managing students who are in an urban environment? They're different. There's different things. Are you managing students who come from nuclear families with 2 parents? Are you managing students who come from 1 parent? Maybe multiple family units. Maybe they're coming from grandpa, grandma, aunt, uncle, older sister. Who's watching them? Who are you really going to be interacting with? And also, are the students, what's their level of trauma? And this is something that we don't really talk about much, but the level of trauma does change how you figure on how you're going to manage students. Medical diagnoses change how you're going to manage students. Behavior plans change how you're going to manage students. You don't manage an idea of a class. You manage the class you have. That is the biggest thing. Really, the only way you can manage students is once you get to know them. You can have systems and principles and ideas and routines and procedures, and those are all important, but it will ultimately end up being successful only if you're managing the students that you have. A little discussed issue is the fact that behavior management and classroom management also includes the teacher. So managing ourselves, because something that we don't think about enough is the fact that we have triggers. And some of us have trauma, and it can be a factor in how we are managing ourselves in our classrooms. I know for myself, there are a couple different triggers that have in the past sent me off to where I was no longer thinking like a reasoning adult. I had gone into emotional land. And so things like saying to my face no, lying to my face, those things brought about a really emotional response in me based on family history and issues outside the classroom. And I had to really take responsibility for that, because while yes, I am an emotional being, my responsibility is to manage that behavior and really take that into consideration. So when you think about managing our classroom and behavior management, remember that sometimes we're going to have to manage ourselves and how we react to things. All right, this brings us to what is behavior management, especially in the classroom context. So it's really twofold. You have your routines and procedures. Those are the bedrock. That's what you set up at the beginning of the year. And hopefully, if you've thought through things pretty well, you won't have to change those. You'll be able to be consistent. How are we entering the room every day? That's not going to need to change a whole lot throughout the year. How do we turn in papers? How do we know when something's due? How do we know what exactly format we're supposed to put the paper in? How do we line up? Where do we line up? When do we line up? All of these things, those are procedures and routines, and they have to be set and trained. Fourth graders need to be trained on how to get into a line. Even though they've been trained in kindergarten, and first grade, and second grade, and third grade, they still need to be trained on how to get into a line. They still need to be trained on number order. They still need to be trained on the homework goes in the homework bin in the beginning of class. Not later in the day when you remember it, but at the beginning of class. Your name goes in the top right corner. When you set up an essay, you put a title, you put your name, you start with an indent. All of these things are routines, procedures that you set up. If you want them to put their work in alphabetical order so that you can get it, collect it for homework and everything, then you train it. If you want them to come to a carpet at the sound of a certain bell or the certain song, then you train it. Those are the procedures and routines, and kids thrive on those. The better your routines, and by better I mean the most clear and consistent of your routines, the better, like 80% of the class will be, because they love that routine. They'll remind you toward the middle of the year, we need to do this next or something. And you're just like, you're right. I forgot. I got thinking about something else. So once you get those in, they'll run with them. They love it. That's 80%. The other 20%, they're the outliers. So you've got about 10% of your class possibly that could run the class themselves. Like they are that on top of it, that motivated. They know why they're here. They are ready. And then you got the other 10 who sometimes seem like they are actively trying to derail the class and that they don't care about anything and they're just gonna disrupt and ask for attention and blah. That's the other side. And that's where we get to the other side of behavior in classroom management, which is going to be the rewards and consequences. All right, some backstory time. I am a very strong-willed individual. So that kind of plays into it a little bit later. I work at an urban school, and my school is a Title I. In fact, last year, 74% of our population was low income and poverty level. We have mostly single parent families, being grandparents, aunts, uncles, multiple family units. And with that in mind, we have a lot of behavior issues. I'm not trying to oversell it, but we have a behavior specialist at our campus who is trained in restraint, and we have a counselor, a school counselor, like emotional counselor. We also have another person, so all these are separate people. We have another person who provides social emotional learning. So I'm saying we have a lot. One of our principals, like the assistant principal, is specifically in charge of family relations and behavior. So we deal with a lot of behavior issues. I have had students who were schizophrenic. I have had students who had a maturity level so young that they were kindergarten. I've had students who were runners. I've had students who were throwers. I had a student once who picked up an office chair. I'm not talking about like a student desk chair, an office chair, and threw it across the room. I've had students who were suicidal. The entire gamut. So with that said, I have found a way to 90% of the time keep my classroom management going and keep behavior at baseline. So baseline is normal for them. Not necessarily normal for somebody else in a different situation, but definitely normal for them. And it requires a lot of flexibility, and it requires a lot of kind of internal monologuing with it's okay, that's not important, it's okay. I'll get into more. So I have been to many different behavior management trainings, and I personally think that the principles, of course, are cumulative. You pick up a little bit here, a little bit there, and they're all valuable. But some of the best that I've been to and that have helped me the most, and that I really embrace, have been the love and logic behavior principles. Love and logic is a system, not a principles-based way of looking at behavior and managing it. And I would not say that I'm an expert by any means. I've gone to a few trainings. I've been reading this book, Teaching with Love and Logic by Jim Fay and David Funk, and I will link, I'll put it down in the description below. So Love and Logic, when it comes to classroom behavior, I'm sure people have heard about it for parenting, but when it comes to teaching, basically comes with the first mindset being, I am not in control. A student is an autonomous person, and they will struggle for control. If they feel like they don't have any control, they will seek to find a place to control. Therefore, as a teacher, I need to endeavor to give them some control in a structured, in a specific way that can help them safely learn. What that means is choices. Are you going to clean up this mess on your own, or would you like some help? This is a choice where I'm happy with either way. I just intend for them to get the mess cleaned up. They can clean it up on their own, or they can clean it up with help. But it does give them a chance for some choice in the matter. I see that you aren't working. Would it be a good idea to get the work done here? Or would you like a different seat to work on this? They're still getting the work done. So choices they give the student a feeling of control while still having them work and do what they need to do. And it's important that the choices be things that you would like. Not like, you can get the work done now or you're going to fail. Well, no. That's, first of all, that's too cut and dried. And it's also a choice. I don't want them to fail. We're not going to put that as an option. What you can say, if at the end of the day no work got done, well, I'll be happy to save the work for you for tomorrow. Or, I would love for you to get this work done, but if you don't think that you're able to, I'll be happy to put it in your homework folder for you. And here's another thing, with Love and Logic, So consequences have to be very concrete. The consequences are there. I'm not shielding them from the consequences of not doing their work. However, the empathy also has to be there. The love part, which is basically empathy. You're not being fair, says the student. I'm sorry that you feel that. I really did not want to seem unfair. Could you tell me how I was being unfair? Okay, this might be a time where you're like, no, I was not being fair. That's ridiculous. You're just blaming. But to the student, maybe you really did seem unfair. So that empathy, that I'm willing to listen, what would you like to say is unfair? That goes a long way. Maybe they failed. I've had situations where they didn't do what they needed to do. They got a bad grade. And they come up and they're upset and everything. And I'm like, I am so sorry. That looks so painful. I really wish you'd gotten a better grade too. And then nothing. Here's the thing. With empathy, it takes a lot not to go into the next natural feeling of, I hope next time you'll do better. That's not empathy. That's where you're just like, you should have known better. So it's really where you let them feel the feels. They're sad that they got that, and you can be sad with them. They already know what they need to do for next time. It's not like it's a rocket science, like totally you never told them that the work needed to be done to get a good grade. So you don't need to tell them, well, next time hopefully you'll do better. No, I'm so sorry you feel like this. It really is hard to deal with a bad grade. It's true. So, love and logic is very much, it's giving the control to the student and recognizing them as that autonomous individual. And it's also giving you a break, because at the end of the day, you gave them the options. They didn't choose to take them. That's not my responsibility. At the end of the day, if they choose not to do it, I'm not going to take their hand and make them do it. I'm not going to, you can't say those bad things. I'm not going to hold your mouth shut and make it to where you can't say those bad things. What I did was I gave you the correct way. You chose the wrong way. It is now your responsibility to deal with what comes next. And so, like I said, love and logic, the way I use it is more as a principle than a specific set of rules. Now, there are some strategies you can take from love and logic. So one of the things as you go on with love and logic is learning how to manipulate events or engineer events so that the outcome that you want is achieved. For example, I had a student who was a runner. He was diagnosed with bipolar and it was a mess. It was a mess. And he actually came into my classroom from another classroom where it just wasn't working and everything. So he came into my classroom and I told him, dude, I'm so glad to have you here. I'm going to tell you this. If you stick with our classroom and you can handle our classroom, you will succeed in this class. So he's like, so first of all, starting with a baseline. So he had he had his own situation in the back of the room. He had a parapro that stayed with him. He, just kind of hung out there. And he was expected to do work. Well, on a day where he was having a bad day, he wasn't doing anything. He was under the table, not going to do anything that day. Well, he had been used to at lunchtime and we have recess before lunch. At recess time, walking with the class to the recess, and what had happened in the past was the teacher, once they dismissed the rest of the class for recess, expected him to stay back and talk about his behavior. Well, he liked to, once he got out there, beeline, he ran off. Like, it was either chase him or give up. And he was willing to be chased. He had led the camp parapros, or the campus parapros, a merry chase throughout the entire campus. He actually managed to escape one time and was running down the side of the road like a busy street. So, did not want that happening. So, the day comes and he's having a bad day, not gonna do his work. Rather than chance the scenario of us being at that door and the rest of the class going to recess and him needing to stay and talk to me, I decided I'm going to engineer the situation a little bit. So, about 10 minutes before recess time, I have my phone. I text our behavior specialist and I say, could you come in at such and such time? Because I think that our friend needs someone to sit with him while we go to recess. And so behavior specialist comes in right as we're lining up for recess, and I say, oh, it's okay. Mr. So-and-so is going to stay with you. You don't need to walk out with us. That's okay. We walked out. He stayed in there. We had our talk. He went to recess later. The idea is not to have conflict. We do not want to see who is the most determined, because almost all the time the kid is the most determined. So we engineer situations that don't require us to have a conflict. So they can push, but I've already engineered the situation. I'm not pushing back. The same thing, you can think of a lot of different ways. I've set it up to where at the beginning of the year, I have extra time so that we need extra time lining up. We're having trouble lining up. I'm not stressed. We took 10 minutes to line up. I'm not stressed. We had that extra time. And that lets me have the kind of control that I need so that I can handle students and their myriad of issues without becoming emotionally involved. Because once you've gotten your emotions involved, usually it's all over. So the last question I'm going to be discussing is the how. How do you manage behavior? And a lot of different people have talked about this. You have to have routines and procedures for everything, and you have to teach them. That is the first step, and usually the first part of the year, and a lot of times with a refresher around Christmas or the beginning of the new year, is going to be, we're going over routines and procedures. So, turning in papers, lining up, sitting down, speaking in class, discussing, collaborating, going to the bathroom, going to get water, turning in anything, finding supplies, how to use materials, how to use seating. So many things have to have procedures. If you're going to do it with students in the day, you're probably going to have to teach them how it's going to be done. This is going to keep them safe. This is going to help them learn. This is going to save your sanity. I personally am a stickler for lineup. I have my way of having them line up that I think is the most safe, that saves my sanity as we go through the school. And my way is facing forward, hands at sides, mouth closed, and at a walking pace. All of those things I've drilled into my students. It literally is like being a sergeant in boot camp. We're gonna try that again. So routines and procedures. Harry Wong, with his first day of school. This is a really old copy, but seriously, if you don't have this, you should get it just for the routines and procedures. There's some things that I don't agree with him about, like the first day being like the most end all be all days, but he definitely has so much to say about routines and procedures that everyone should know. So that one's a good book. The other thing is making sure to use tools. There are a lot of tools available to teachers now. So use your tools. You've got Class Dojo. You've got doorbell signals. You've got attention getters. Class, yes. Whatever your attention getters. I'm really not great with the attention getters. Mine is usually the class. But anyway, rewards, class economies, tokens, compliments, taps, whatever. Calls home, that's a tool. Think sheets. I use think sheets. I have a special essay. Actually, I keep copies of it. It's already filled out, and when students have to go and serve a detention, like an after-school detention, and they need something to do, I send them with the essay that they just copy, and it's like 2 pages long, and it's not their favorite thing. Referrals to the office are a tool. You want to use those sparingly, not because it ticks off the principal or something. You want to use those sparingly because it's always best if you can keep the relationship between you and the student, or you and the parents and the student. It maintains that authority, responsibility relationship. And if you need to send them to the office, do that. But I don't do it very often myself. Another really good tool is having a buddy classroom. So I have a couple other teachers in different parts of the school that, depending on the student, depending on the situation, I will send another student to and be just like, they need to do a think sheet in your classroom for about 10 minutes and then come back, or 5 minutes, depending on how slow it is, or when they cool off, or when they're ready. Having a buddy classroom can be a big help. Behavior specialists, that's a tool. Sometimes I'm on my phone texting the behavior specialist like, so-and-so came in and they're making cat noises. Or so-and-so came in and she's chewed her eraser. Can you have a talk with her? Because I still have to teach the class. Whatever. That's a tool. The biggest, probably best way to actually manage your classroom is to have relationships, to build relationships with the family and with the student. So that's very individual, and other people will do it different than you do. I love watching CJ Reynolds and Real Rap with Reynolds and the way he builds relationships. I am so impressed by that. I would love to be able to do that, but my personality is not quite that. There's some days where I'd bring out the magic 8-ball in a heartbeat, but whatever. Anyway, building relationships. You need to be authentic. You need to be someone who's calm. I would say peaceful. What I mean is, we don't need to bring our emotional baggage in. Students, we're not connecting like that. They're not buddy-buddy. But having a calm, peaceful person that they feel that it is safe to be real with can build a relationship that's quite strong and has a big impact on their behavior and their way of viewing the class. They might be super emotional, but if you're calm and you're peaceful, sometimes it rubs off. Of course, noticing things about the students, talking with them are great ways to build relationships. Not making judgments, not like, "Ooh, I see that you like purple. I love purple." Okay, it's innocent, but it's a judgment. And other students might be like, I like blue or red. Does that mean that that's not as good a color? Of course you didn't mean that. That's not what you meant. But just noticing, oh, you like purple. That's pretty. Oh, you like, even maybe not even put, that's pretty. It's hard not to make judgments. Oh, you like bugs. I don't like bugs. I don't have to say that. Always assume the best about students. That will make a relationship so much easier if you're assuming the best and not the worst. It might not be a great relationship, but there's more relationship if you assume the best. Of course, that goes without saying that you're talking to parents, you're communicating with them, and working together on all of these things. That's such a big deal. Communicating with whoever you have to communicate it with, as long as they're HIPAA approved. And be as relevant as possible. I am not good at being relevant. I don't have same musical tastes, and I can't manufacture that. Don't have the same tastes in books. So not very relevant, but I try and be as relevant as possible. I'll bring in a video game reference if I can. So those kind of things help build relationships. Of course, at some point, you're going to have probably the situation where a consequence or a reward is warranted. And that is a big part of how with behavior management. Rewards and consequences both should be logical and should be natural. They shouldn't be getting a pizza party every week. There's nothing they're doing that is that good every week. They also shouldn't be getting sent to detention every week. If that's the situation, there's something more going on. So situations with consequences and rewards should both be logical and natural. Going hand in hand with that is that rewards and consequences should not be emotional. So, for instance, if your consequence for something is that the kid gets yelled at, that's not an appropriate consequence. It might feel good to you, but it's not an appropriate consequence. If they get gushed over, like you just pile on verbal praise, like, oh, this done so well and everything, that's also not really an appropriate reward. I mean, yes, it's good to recognize good behavior, but good behavior should seem natural. Not something like, oh, good boy, here's that treat for you. Unless you're in kindergarten. Then all bets are off. But for fourth graders at least, they just like, that's really awkward and weird. And I would feel very weird with that. I think I'm probably going to do a different video about some of my consequences and rewards and exactly how they work, because it's kind of a big topic and I know I'm already getting kind of long in this video. Like I said, there's so much to be said about consequences and rewards, and even maybe a whole video on Class Dojo. But I think I'm going to wrap it up here because it is getting long. Thank you, those of you who have stuck all the way to the end. I hope that my take on behavior management helps somebody, and I hope that you feel more empowered to take some of these tools and apply them to a classroom. I very much encourage you to pick up a copy of Harry Wong's The First Days of School. I'm sure anybody who is in teaching programs has heard of Harry Wong. And look up some of the Teaching with Love and Logic resources. I found this at a thrift store because I'm cheap, but there are many resources. If there's anything you would like me to expound on, please put it in the comments. Let me know what you're interested in, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.